hello, and welcome back to Swamp School Live. I want to welcome you to our show today. Kind of excited. We've got a lot of stuff to cover, and it's gotten pretty complicated of late, some of the new stuff that's out. So we're going to go over that today. But my name is Mark Seelinger. I'm the founder of the Swamp School, and I want to welcome you to our show today. And I do want to mention here that we do have a call-in number, and I'll put this up here real quick. If you would like to join our show today, please call in 919-297-2540. If you are just listening to us on the road and not necessarily seeing the video, 919-297-2540. Love to have you. We'll call screen arena. We'll be happy to take your calls and see what you've got. So what we're going to do today is a little different in a few things. And actually, before I forget, I don't want to forget this. Let me turn this one off. I got a lot of buttons to push here. And turn that one off. Before we get started, I do want to make a quick shout out to our favorite sponsor, which has been, let me put it over here, Kaze in Garner. This is a Japanese steakhouse. They have been a very, very supportive of our program, and I want to thank them very much. And there's some delicious food there. I was told they did have some, as of last week, some space available over the weekend to take Mom, but I kind of think they're probably booked. But great place to go next week. Wonderful food. And you'll have a great time with that. They're right in Garner, and the information is all up there. But definitely check them out. So let me go back to me. And basically, we need to find me. There we go. So let me fade back. Okay. So we've got a lot to cover, and we've got a lot of interesting topics that relate to the Army Corps. And actually, one more little bit of housekeeping information. If you are wanting to send us some offline questions, we won't be able to answer them during the show, but if you have something as we're going through the show, definitely reach out to us at support@swampschool.org. Just mention the show and the question, and we'll be happy to address it in the next show. So we'll be looking forward to that. So let's put this one off here. And what I want to jump over to is this. This happened on Monday. And I'll be back up here. I can still be up here. This happened on Monday. And it was published on Monday. Whether it actually showed up on Monday, I don't know. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger, or I guess hopefully you can read that. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Let's zoom in a little bit. But hold on a second here. That help a little. It's a little bit bigger. There we go. So what is this? The Regulatory Request System module sounds an extremely esoteric thing to be worried about, but he basically has a few issues with how to get stuff submitted to the Corps, and essentially how we get a number of JD requests, regulatory requests. So this is the Regulatory Request System, and we've got a new system that basically allows us to deal with the prior construction notification form that we have to fill out, the PCN. And this is a pretty big deal. So we'll go through that. But actually, we have a caller, and we don't want to keep him on the line. So I'm going to have our caller come in here, and we will get him on. Hold on one second. So while we're waiting for that to work, we will get this going. And let me flip over to caller. So, while we're waiting here, basically, so back to the PCN. What this did was, let me see if I can get this to work here, was basically give you more power to submit on some of the items that were in the, one second here. There we go. I got my call coming in. It takes a few minutes here. Hello, you're on Swamp School Live.
Hey, Mark. I have this is Blaine Rothhauser from GZA. I have a Hemiquist that's soiled in the coastal plains of New Jersey. I would say it's the outer coastal plain. So it's a really gravelly, quartz laden top base with a sandy soil that goes down to 24 inches, no problem, with a chroma in hue of like 10YR. It starts off without any organic mineral layer at all. It's just all sand all the way down. It's got a very light coloration, like a 10YR 4-4-ish type thing. And it's problematic because the client's asking, it was delineated originally as a wetland. As a matter of fact, a letter of interpretation by, how New Jersey's got the agreement to take over the 404, and so he's trying to ask me, can I? This property got a wetland delineation, historic, and they're calling it wetland. And I just don't see it. Vegetation is outside is on the margins. It's got a lot of cedar, almost 100% switchgrass, but it's a well-drained soil in this Hemiquist profile. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had problematic coastal sands? I'm sorry to get too much detail in on it. How do you deal with those coastal?
Where are you in Jersey?
Environments.
Whereabouts in Jersey?
It's Old Bridge. So
okay.
So it's Old Bridge. It's just a little north of, if you know New Jersey, I think you do. It's just a little bit south of the Raritan outfall into the Atlantic.
Okay. So I got it. All right. Yeah, you're near the Quaking Bogs kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, Hemic soil, the issue is, so you're looking at, you could be looking at an A1 or an F or an A2 with some mineral. Is there any mineral underneath it? How thick is it?
It's 24, all really, it's sand. It's mineral all the way down to 24, and it's it doesn't ribbon. It's moist. We had rain days before, and it has a moist, but you can't squeeze anything out of it. It's well drained, as the profile says, but it certainly doesn't hold water. There's no water in the hole down to any depth that I could get. And it did have very 10% or less modeling in the more 5, 6, 8-ish zones of a 10YR, but very slight. No other redox that I saw. It just was a soil that I just can't come up in my mind with an equation that would make it hydric.
Yeah, I mean, the rhizospheres would be what I'd be looking for. If it's that dry, in terms of it's not an A1. Because the problem with an A1, it's just pure organic, which this sounds like you got a lot of sand. So you're looking at the S's. So you got a mass sand grain kind of situation, and usually with that you want to see rhizospheres. That's going to be your indication. The problem is the dark material just stick to the sand, and you could dry it forever and it's still going to be black. So that's kind of the issue. But you really need to see the rhizospheres.
I'm sorry to interrupt. If I don't get the rhizosphere, do I start thinking it's not?
So what's you said is a switchgrass over top, so which is fac wet, is it not in Jersey?
What's that?
That's fac wet in Jersey, isn't it? Switchgrass? Panicum virgatum?
No, it's actually fac in New Jersey.
Okay. Well, that's better. Okay.
And all the marginal stuff is fac. Yeah, but I have to say, it had if I pronounce it right, Iliocaris. That was sporadic at the surface, which is that's the only obligate, but it wasn't dominant. It was it was hither and yon, as they say.
Okay, so you get some needle rush in there. Oh boy, that's a tough one. I mean, the black soil in and of itself, if you really do need to see some sort of redox feature in there. As far as your modeling goes, you said what was your matrix chroma again? Did you say it was a 2 or less?
Like 4-4.
Oh.
Yeah, it was outside. There was no dark surface. There was no nothing dark in the first 12. It just didn't scream hydric to me in any way. But I'm like, oh, this might be one of your. I gotta take your. By the way, I just signed up for your 10 hydric soil problematic.
Well, thank you.
And so I'm like. maybe that'll help me. But it certainly seems to fit the kind of an atypical situation.
Yeah, well, the issue with the atypical is that's why I was asking where you were in the state. I mean, I guess you're in Raritan Formation there, which gives you some of these weird soils down there. There's glauconite in some of the soils, especially in the coastal plain, which will mess with you in the colors. That can be an issue, but without I don't know. I fall back on rhizospheres quite a bit on making a hydric soil call because the idea is that if the soil seems relatively dry, and again, you got to look at the season, but if it seems relatively dry, has a dark color, but if it's not a chroma 2 or less, you're kind of out of it. And then with lack of rhizospheres would really also kind of underscore that. The Oleochris and the switchgrass, I mean, they're, it's not a good news, but the any other hydrology indicators at all?
Yeah, that's I was gonna segue into that. Nothing that no surface indicator of hydrology.
Okay, because that would be the other
land, really flat sandy ground with a ton of switchgrass on it.
Yeah, I mean the other side would be again back to the rhizospheres. If you're losing that in the soils, you're looking at the soils, you're also going to lose that in the hydrology section. And if you don't have any other indicators, sounds like you're out of it. I mean, Jersey has its own rules with the their version of the manual, their Jersey manual essentially, the Jersey approach, the federal manual. But they do kind of go back to at least what's the latest and greatest in the sciences to take a look at the USDA version of the one that just came out actually this year. We've got a new USDA soil manual. Doesn't change a whole lot in terms of that. They just correct a lot of typos, but that would be what I would be looking at. But from I'm having a hard time putting that into anything because my go-to would be for a hemic soil would be the A1. You're not an F3, you're not an F6. If it's a loam, if it's a sandy, you got sandy redox, which would be 1. You could make an argument if it's a depression. This might be something where you're looking at, like for example, an F8 is a depressional system, but you got to have rhizospheres. So if you don't have the rhizospheres, then you're kind of out of it. And I think you're gonna be hard pressed to call that a hydric soil.
And that's confirms my analysis. It's flat, it's FAC at best on the veg side, and I did not see redox, rhizospheres. I really didn't note it in my field notes. I would have if I had seen it. And here's the follow up, and I'll let you go since I took a lot of your time, and I really appreciate it. The Hemiquist, when you look at that hydric soil profile, doesn't fit it. Do you see that a lot? That these
is that what it's mapped as? Yeah,
that's what it's mapped as.
Well, and the problem is if it's an older mapping, most of these things were not farmable, so not a lot of effort was put into getting it down to brass tacks on what exactly might be out there. If you couldn't farm it, and maybe it was too wet, so a Hemiquist, so an incepta soil with an aqueous moisture regime with a lot of organic in it. That's fun. Yeah, that sounds bad on the surface anyway. But as far as the colors go, I mean, you're just going to have to find, you want to try to avoid monitoring well regimes and things like that. If this how big is the site?
It's 20 acres of which the question is, and it's consistent, homogeneous throughout. The center 15 is the focal point. So that's what I'm up against.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, if you can, I would just rule out, I mean, the way I usually go through it is, A, S, or F, and if it's a sand, that limits your possibilities. You still have a few A indicators in there. And then, look at the landscape, what type of landform are you in? And then also, do you have chromas less than 2? And, look at the ones that allow them over 2, they're always related to landforms. So in the case of a depression, is it a depressional system? If it's no, then that's not going to work. If it's in a floodplain, that would give you an exception to the rule. And that's not the case. Red parent material. Nope. Now you have a slight possibility there because you got that weird Raritan stuff over there. It's very strange in that part of the state as far as soils go. It's technically not red parent material, but it's red soil. So, it's rare.
Yeah, no, I would know it. I've come up against red parent in my career many times.
And then you're in the acid producing soil part of the state too, which adds to the fun. Don't dig too deep. But the, they got all kinds of weird stuff that's in there. But yeah, basically, once you rule out landform, then you got to look at what's left, and everything else requires a chroma 2 or less. So I would hang my hat on that. And then no rhizospheres just
that's where I got to.
Yep.
It's exactly where I got to, Mark. So I'm happy to hear your analysis that I'm not too crazy. I'm crazy, but not too crazy.
Yeah, me too. Well, it's not like I'm just putting this out on the radio to chat. It's a private conversation here or anything. It's not like the entire world can see us. But
well, thank you so much for this.
Sure, well, I appreciate the call, and
that was really helpful.
Look forward to seeing you in class in about 2 weeks.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, take it easy. Thanks. Well, that was fun. While I was chatting, we have a question that came in over the help desk. Is, have you noticed any trends or patterns when a pipe connection severs the Army Corps wetland jurisdiction? And that definitely is a case. I had a JD that decided a pipe interrupting a tributary was too long, so the portion upstream of the pipe was non-jurisdictional. That would be consistent. Another Corps project manager virtually told me that the JD should have been decided differently since the flow regime through the pipe was relatively permanent. Oh, that is definitely a issue to deal with. Technically, when a stream hits a pipe, you get into this concept of, is it a relatively permanent connection, from the standpoint of being a stream, but then you get into, is it indistinguishable from the parent waters of the United States, or in the case of tributary to the parent waters of the United States? And that's kind of the way we look at these anchor waters. Now, we're looking for clarification on this. We're looking at the significant nexus, and the abandonment of the significant nexus. Before I do this, if anybody else has any questions, let me put this up here. So if you've got any questions, please call in. But basically, we're not a Zoom or team meeting thing here, so that was one of the things. We've had a few calls about that. But as far, going back to the question here, if you have a severed stream, meaning that it is no longer a stream, it's basically it's piped, whatever, the guidance that we've seen come out from March of last year is that would then disconnect the stream from being a waters of the United States. They don't really have within the guidance, and we're talking about the March 2025 guidance that the Corps put out after Sackett. So this was almost 2 years after Sackett. Basically that would sever the jurisdiction. So anything above that would probably be non-jurisdictional. And it has more to do with the fact that you've got something that's distinguishable from the wetland proper, I guess, if you will, and this other water body, and and pipes and things like that are an issue. So we've seen plenty of those. I've actually gotten involved in a couple of those lately that we've gotten calls about and asked me to actually go take a look at. So if you have, a site like that, basically, and you're going to get, I will say this, you're going to get some variation from the Corps themselves. There is a kind of a challenge with the Corps on kind of old guard and, what was done, for say the last 40 years and what we're doing today. Yes, that's changed. And we've got a definite challenge in front of us there. So that is a big deal. It's definitely a big deal on that. So if you want to take a look at the jurisdictional there, just kind of, that's where it kind of cuts off. I'm not sure if there's a distance, like if you've got a 12-foot pipe versus a 50-foot pipe or, whatever, there could be an issue there that, I hate to say it's going to go back to the Corps, but it's kind of on your job to sort out this mess and, basically explain to the Corps what's going on out there. So that's an issue. And that's actually kind of the bulk of our content today. I wanted to kind of go over that because we've got a lot of stuff that have come up. So let me jump back over, and please, I know we got some calls to our help desk looking to see if they could get in, but just basically the phone number is the call into a live show, just like, whatever radio station, we've got this pretty set up. This is a cool setup. If you happen to be in the Apex area and want to see what we did here, it's pretty cool. This is not a Zoom meeting. And I don't want to don't tell my wife how much I spent on this, but it is a pretty big setup here. And we've got a lot of cool things about setting up phone calls and all the call center stuff and things like that. So I left the number up here, so please call in. And I'm going to transition. Let me turn this down. And let's go back to this, because we need to talk about this some more. So I'll stay off the camera for the moment. So back to this. Basically, the big point on this, and this relates to jurisdictions, is if you are filling out a permit application, and I wanted to kind of go over this chart here. So we have the nationwide permit program, and you can see all the list here. And then I've got this PDF, and I may need to make this a little bigger. So hold on a second. So yeah, this one I just wanted to kind of show here. So you can see there's this issue of pre-construction notification, PCN required. This means that you don't have to notify the Corps. So for example, Nationwide Permit 1, aids to navigation, you don't have to notify the Corps. You just simply stay within the guidelines of the permit, and there's no limits. Now we get into where we get into a little bit more complication, and I'll use the oil and gas is a good example. Nationwide 12, a Section 10 permit. So basically, PCN is required if you need a Section 10, if discharges result in the loss of greater than a tenth of an acre, or it's a new oil and gas pipeline greater than 250 miles in length, largely because you're doing a FERC certificate at that point. So if you stay under this and this doesn't happen, you don't need to file the PCN at all. So that's essentially the idea, is you're not going to need that. So what you do is you go in and you fill out the RRS form. And let me go back to what that means. So basically what happens is you've self-verified the pre-construction notification is not required, and that's new. So that's the new thing as of Monday. And essentially you then get, as I understand how this is supposed to work, essentially an automated response that will basically verify that, based on what you submitted, that you will basically show that, you're staying under this, and you're kind of, I guess, signing something on this. So the idea is that they're looking for, I guess, to limit these de minimis projects here. So you see the key benefits: ensuring required fields are completed through automatic data validation, improve communication through emails and automated emails. So the idea is that if you don't need a PCN, there's no reason to get the Corps involved. So you basically get a letter. I would see that as very handy in the situation where you might be doing, a plan, especially up in the Northeast, where you have the planning boards, I'll come back here, getting involved, and you basically want to show that you've done your due diligence, essentially. So here's my letter from the Army Corps, and it saves them, having to go through that. So that's sort of the thing there. But basically, online access to all relevant regulatory information, and reducing internal data entry and information can be found here. So this is the new the RRS has been around for a couple of years now. It's been still kind of in its infancy. The Corps has been working very hard on this. I've attended a couple of meetings with the Corps on some of the things that they were working on, and actually the bulk of what I wanted to talk about today is the ARDR. That is essentially the data that goes with this. So just a couple other fine points on this one about the permits, and I wanted to show one more thing here on, I think Nationwide 14 was one I was going to look at. Nationwide 14, we have limits half of an acre. This is what is limited by the permit. If you stay under a tenth of an acre, then basically you're fine, so long as you have discharges. You don't have any discharges into special aquatic sites. You're like, what is that? That's an old term from a long time ago, but it's been around for a while. So let's go to the definition. This is from Title 33, Chapter 2, Part 330, 330.2, and it has to do with some definitions. Special aquatic sites means wetlands. Now, they didn't ask you, did it mean jurisdictional wetlands? It simply means wetlands. So wetlands are still deemed a special aquatic site. So the bottom line is that if you are going to fill anything really other than a wetland, mudflat, vegetative shallow, coral reef, riffle and pool complexes, aka streams or sanctuaries, I'm not really sure what's left. A puddle? And that would be kind of a mudflat. I'm not sure. But the idea is that, I guess a pond, that might work. If you had like a farm pond and you're going to fill that in for a road, that might fall under that. But the idea is that it's not a special aquatic site, and streams are considered special aquatic sites. And if it has a riffle and pool complex as opposed to a ditch, which would not have a riffle and pool complex. So you have to verify that you don't have one. But that's kind of a new, well, it's not a new concept. This is a very old concept. We used to do special aquatic analysis back in the 80s when we were doing FERC certificates. So it's not a new thing. It was an EPA special aquatic site, and they had a further list. They do define this a little bit further for the refuges and the sanctuaries. So if you have a stream or water that's on a basically designated as a federal state sanctuary, then you also have to file the PCN. All that means, it doesn't mean you can't do the job. It just simply means that you have to file the PCN, which is a lot of work. So that's that. Okay. So that was the, and then all these permits, you can see PCN not required. Surface coal mining, you're going to need a PCN no matter what. And then it's primarily looking at these that basically, the other one, like residential developments, Nationwide 29, that's being used very heavily in North Carolina right now, the Nationwide 29, and that's going to require PCN no matter what you do, so you're not getting out of that. So it does limit it a bit, but if you're doing like moist soil management for wildlife, I think there was a boat ramps and cleanup of hazardous waste, you still got to notify them, but I thought there was one for doing, I can't find it when I want to find it. Oh, well, it was looking for the restoration projects one, but I think there's a limit on that as well. Okay, I didn't mean to blur your mind there. Okay, let's go back to me for a second. Turn me off here and fade over to here. All right. Now, what I wanted to do was just do a quick kind of overview. We put together a presentation, and I wanted to kind of do this as a dry run. Now, this is a pretty long presentation. It's meant to be about an hour long. We're not going to do that in an hour. So we're going to kind of shortcut it here. So this will run another 15, 20 minutes or so. But I wanted to show this one as kind of what we've been up to. And we're working with real estate companies, developers, a whole host of people. And let me just put this up real quick for calls. Definitely hope to get this. It has to do with the due diligence and the quality of your wetland reports. And this is becoming a huge problem. I'm kind of taken aback by the problem. I thought we were better than this kind of a problem. And so I felt the need to kind of jump in on this one. So let me just go over here to this, and I will take that down for the moment. But please call in if you have a question. We can take anything. So we'll just change topic. I'm kind of I'm easily distracted. So, but basically the hidden cost of a bad wetland delineation. And this was done in direct response to a couple things that happened very recently. Of course, the RRS module, which we just talked about, is kind of what the underlying thing here is, that you have to submit data in a proper format. And really what we're seeing is what is being submitted to the Corps and what is being reviewed has gotten awful. I don't know how to put it nicely. It's been absolutely awful. So let me just flip through a couple of these slides here. Essentially what we're doing is they're somewhat switching and moving the risk management a little bit here. And I use the word risk, and that freaks people out. The idea is that they're looking for complete information on aquatic resource data. And historically, the Corps has only gotten pieces of it. I've seen data forms that have come in that basically were flat out wrong, where we're getting into data that just doesn't explain really what was out there, or just completely messed up the data. They saw soil, and that wasn't the soil that they thought it was, or they just didn't write it down. I mean, stuff that just flat out didn't match it. But basically what happens is, if you miss data, it's a poorly labeled map, or you're missing a section in the aquatic resource delineation report, you're leaving the Corps to kind of guess in between, and they're not real big on that. They basically are looking at an online result based upon whatever was submitted to them, and that's what you're going to get. There's not going to be as much interaction, if you will, with the agencies that maybe is what you're seeing in the past. Let me get these slides here. So let me flip this one. So, and doing self-verification, doing this RRS, is not a self-insurance. You basically does not mean there's no risk to the user that produces a particular screening result. You still need a defensible record showing that the aquatic resources were reviewed. And let me see if I got a slide here. I want to get into this. this is, I guess, the first thing that comes up. You'll see here, current ARDR report and cover letter. That's probably the biggest thing. What's an ARDR report? And what do we have to do to produce one of these things? It used to be, back in the olden days, we used to produce reports. We would have, our data forms. We would say, we've got a, 3 criteria data form. We would explain the data. We would explain what we found. We would have a little discussion on soils. The caller we had, we're talking about, where is the site located? Geology was a section on there because that is an influence that would, all those things would go in. The ARDR report and the protocols that the Corps asked for, which came out last year, definitely had this. And we wanted to get some more, basically some more data from them. So we were producing all this data, and then it would go into the Corps' report. And now we always joke the only thing they were going to look at was the data forms. We know. I mean, that was what they wanted to see. But you still had to explain it, and your client needed to know what it was saying. And that was kind of a big issue. And what we're seeing is typically a PCN letter, a request will be the PCN form. It'll have maybe a map or two that are usually 8.5 by 11 cut sheets, and usually they're on Google Earth. And then they will have a couple data forms. That's it. So you're not telling them anything. You're not explaining anything. You're just simply submitting that. And maybe that's what you do. And you say, well, that's great. That's a really cheap way to put out a wetland delineation. But the problem is that the delineation quality is a business risk is that if you put together a poor report, you lead the Corps down the garden path. And I'll give you a quick example. Basically, when you do a delineation, it is a business risk document. And what you're looking at is you're telling the client, okay, here's what I think. Now, one of the things the Corps wants you to get away with, I might have skipped the slide array. They don't want you telling them that it's jurisdictional or not. That's up to them to decide. You actually have to go out of your way. Do not put that on the forms. Do not put that on the maps. Jurisdictional wetland, non-jurisdictional. That's their job. And they can kind of their nose out of joint if you start telling them, what's basically what their job is. You're literally telling them how to think, and that kind of annoys them. But as far as the process goes, let me just flip something. What we see is I'm trying to back up a little bit. The problem is that if you do for example, one of the things that was very popular, I've been railing against this for years, and people think I'm nuts on this one, is the PJD. The PJD, Preliminary Jurisdictional Determination, I personally hate them. I never understood them. They do nothing for us. And yet maybe we'll get a caller to say, I do, 10 of these a week. And I have no doubt. And I'm not saying anything, it's a bad thing to do necessarily. But the problem is that you're volunteering to the Corps a piece of property and saying, basically, you're not saying whether it's jurisdictional. They're not saying it's jurisdictional. And what happens with a PJD is if it was jurisdictional, then you would need to do this mitigation or so forth. And they would say that would be the route. But we're not going to debate the jurisdictional issue. We're just simply going to debate the footprint of whatever it is that you've shown and just assume it would have been jurisdictional. And then if it turns out it was jurisdictional, then you're covered because you did all the permitting. Well, what happens, especially in this post-SACIT world, if you have a situation where you submitted a PJD and it turned out that the site wasn't actually jurisdictional at all because of the SACIT ruling, and you went ahead and got the permit and paid for all the mitigation, what would happen? Would the Corps come back and say, gee, we're sorry, you didn't really need that mitigation? The Corps' attitude is they never asked. They never asked, whether it was jurisdictional or not. They just simply asked whether or not essentially, was it, within the confines of a nationwide permit. So if you're doing like a nationwide 29 and you stay under, 10th of an acre or whatever, you're fine. If you do a little bit more, then you need some mitigation, that kind of thing. But if you didn't need any of that because it was non-jurisdictional, then that's kind of the point, that you didn't need it and you shouldn't have made your client get it. And that's kind of the problem. So that's what we're up against in this. And that's what a strong report will do, is it will basically give you what you need to do. So what does an ARDR include? I'm just going to go through these. I promise to do this quickly. In plain language, it documents the environmental resources. It tells the districts essentially what you've got out there, and it should be organized as a report package. I don't think I can see me move my I'm pointing to things on my mouse. I realize you can't see that. But basically, the third bullet point there is it should be organized as a report package, not just a map or a short letter. It should be a regular report. And, I'm sorry if that's not the way your company does things. It's the way they're going to be doing things, because this is now a core requirement. They had not required the ARDR as a rule that you had to do all of this, but what they pretty much are telling you is that, yes, you can just submit the same junk you've been submitting, but don't expect a speedy response. And the goal here is that if you provide the data they're looking for, you will get a speedier response. And that's kind of the idea. But an ARDR, this was the slide I was looking for, is not a jurisdictional determination. It's not up to the consultant to say whether something's jurisdictional or not. Now, you could advise your client based upon the data, we don't think that this would turn out to be jurisdictional. But the upshot of it is that it is still up to the Corps, because that's their purview. And now, if you don't agree with their jurisdictional determination, you can challenge it in court. And now you have this nice report explaining the what, the where, and the why. So these reports should be able to stand up to legal scrutiny, and that's the level. And if you look at some of the stuff that we've seen, especially some of these large tract home developers that are hiring these companies are putting them out like, it's a commodity, essentially, at this point. Wetland delineations is a commodity. They're cranking these things out. And it's awful. It's absolutely awful. So anyway, let me just skip to this. Oops, back one. I will have some of this posted, but this is essentially what the ARDR wants. You've got a cover letter, and then you have section 1 is the general background, the contacts. You're going to have to deal with site access issues and letters, and that's another issue that's become huge on this, is who actually gave the Corps permission to come out on the property. It has to be the landowner, and if it's not the landowner, then they have to have an agent, and there has to be a letter authorizing the agent from the landowner. So you've got to find the landowner. Qualifications, whoever did it, and then the locations. Then there's the field data collection methodology. You need to write that boilerplate again if you haven't used it in years. What regional supplement. I can't tell you how many regional supplement errors we've seen where we'll have a site in one particular region and they use the data forms for another region. So it's the wrong region. Things like that. There's little nuances. All of that speaks to the credibility of the work that's being done. Site conditions. Basically, they want to see a 72-hour rainfall and a 90-day antecedent precipitation, if that's ever working. They've had a lot of problems with the government data sites going down, but that's an issue there. And then any aquatic resource inventories in Section 4, and then Section 5 is the map. So the Section 4 is basically the data. Section 5 and 6 are maps, photographs, GIS deliverables, etc. And that's an ARDR, and that's what they are looking for in detail. And if you've been doing report writing maybe 10 years ago, this probably looks very familiar, but it seems to have gone away. I'm not quite sure why, but it's gone away. So I'll skip through all this because let me just skip to the chase. We wrote this for real estate agents. We actually teach a class for real estate brokers on what they need to know about wetlands. And we're preparing this because this is a new thing that they're running into quite a bit. So we're getting some of this stuff here. And also working with the, let me go back to this. There's a little promo stuff we threw in here. But basically what we're trying to do is train the realtors to understand. Now, when I say realtors, a lot of times these realtors are part of a development team. And so they're interacting with the consultants, and a lot of them will take the posture, that's too complicated for me. I don't understand it. I've never done anything like this before. So how am I supposed to know any of this stuff? I'm just a real estate broker. But at the end of the day, you're a land manager. You're dealing with land. You do need to know this stuff. So it's a big deal. So anyway, this isn't brand new, but it's becoming more and more apparent. The Corps is very proud of its RRS. The folks I was talking to, I guess it was last summer on this, was they were making this kind of I'm going to put me back here, analogy back on that the RRS is going to be the TurboTax for the Army Corps, essentially. So they're going to essentially have the Corps version where you would have like a little checklist as you're going down, filling out the data, and you can actually keep track of, goes down from, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it would keep track of it, just like, when you do your taxes and it's, tax day, and, you're still trying to get a refund. So you keep putting in, those deductions till you finally get a refund up in the upper right-hand corner, kind of that approach. But the the same idea, that you get a complete list. So they're trying to do that. They're also looking at doing state modules. So they would basically be able, just like TurboTax does a state module, they want to have a state module. So you might have a New Jersey or North Carolina or wherever, module here. Let me just put our phone number up here. We're getting close to our end here, and I just want to remind you that you can call in. Definitely call in if you still have some questions. We've gotten a few questions that this is a live show, and the pages that basically they can scroll down. It's here. I got somebody here asked a question. The phone number is to call in this live show, and then they have to go to our website to scroll down to the show page. Oh, to get to the video. Yeah, we kind of moved the page. We've been moving things around. I guess we put a little bit too much on the page. So if you're wondering if you're hearing us and you're wondering where the picture is, just scroll down. It should be coming through, but just scroll down. So again, 919-297-2540 is our call-in number. And if you want to send in a ticket or so, you can click this in over here. So I'll flip this one over. So this is offline questions or comments. Definitely send them to that as well. That was the bulk of it. Let me just see if there was a couple other questions I had come across here. We've got another question coming in. If you bear with me for a second. So we'll come in. And let's see, let me just flip this one off here. And this is getting more and more complicated. There it is. So let me scroll to the end of this presentation. And basically, to close this presentation out, and again, we've got a lot of slides on this, so we just skipped. But basically, the idea is that a wetland delineation is not just a technical exercise. It's a business risk document. And we're looking for, let me just hold on a second here. Once I get this. So we will see if we can get this person to call in here. But basically, we've got a fair amount of hidden costs of bad delineation. Also comes from missing support, unclear maps, weak documentations, or incorrect assumptions. And those are big parts of it. What boggles my mind is the number of people that will do a call based on, a soil that they just don't have. All right. Hi, this is Mark. You're on the air. Sure. One second. I'm sorry. I just cut you off on that. Could you repeat that question again?
Yeah, no problem. The ARDR package that
Right.
you would put together for the Corps to review your wetland delineation, is that completed in addition to a JPA or a JARPA type application? So an application for Section 404 or Section 10 permit. So is it supplementary to the actual application for the fill and dredge?
Yeah. See, that's going to be complicated because you've got a joint application with the state as well. That's what the Corps is working on. The idea is the ARDR is going to be your wetland report. So that's going to be a standalone document related to all aquatic resources on the site. So it's not just the wetland. So if you've got a Section 10 water, you're going to have that as a separate discussion point. You'll have a map showing that's the Section 10 water. You'll have a map showing here are all the wetlands, that kind of stuff. That'll all be in your ARDR report. As far as the RRS goes, how that gets submitted in your particular state, it may be a while before they roll that out. They're rolling this out slowly. They're starting, they actually started in North Carolina. I think it's the first state to take it on, and they're rolling it west. It is national. It is up and running, but you may have to check with the state on how they want to handle their end of it. Because a lot of times, like we have in North Carolina, we have a state clearinghouse where you used to send everything to the state first, and then it would go to the Corps, and this sort of bypasses that. But as far as the ARDR data goes, it is basically it's kind of what I look at. It's just a good old fashioned wetland report. That's really all it is.
Okay.
Just with the data.
Okay.
Does that help?
It's specific to allow the Corps to do their review of the data that you put together for your wetland or your waters delineation, and right?
Their goal on this, believe it or not, is not to have to go out in the field. If your data is sufficient enough that they can verify that it is going to represent the site, then there is no need for a field inspection by them. I doubt they'll do that right away, but that's their goal. That was the end goal of this, and that was one of the folks at the Corps was saying, is that they just don't have the staff to do it, and they're trying to get this. So they're looking for the consultants to kind of step up their game. Is really what it comes down to.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. I was a little confused on the crossover between the application part of it and this ARDR information.
Yeah. The way to think of ARDR is it's the report. It's the full report, and
okay.
For any of the other state required data, I mean, you could have endangered species stuff in there, cultural resources in there. You'd have all of that added to the ARDR. That's all part of it. They have a pretty good outline. We've done a couple blog posts on it in terms of what's required. And actually, I'll put up this presentation as a handout on the website, so you can see there's a pretty good checklist of what they kind of expect in there. But they do have, you can also go on their website and they will tell you flat out, this is what goes in ARDR.
Right. Okay.
Great. All right.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for calling.
You so much.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that call. We also have an ARDR class, by the way. I forgot to mention that. Raina's sending me a little text here and a little note. Yes, we have a class. We do teach this. We're actually put this out a while ago, kind of ahead of everybody else, and most people didn't know what ARDR was and never heard of it. And, so it's been taking us a while, and I kind of forget that we've had this class for a long time. So it's like, so I kind of take it at that level. So, but anyway, I'll leave the line open for just a little bit longer. And again, I'll leave the call-in number here. If anybody else has a last-minute call-in, we'd love to hear from you. I had messed up the second caller there with the audio, so I got that fixed. Still learning this system. If anybody's ever done this stuff, it's pretty intense. As far as keep this, I think I have 16 separate tracks running at the same time to run this show. I understand why producers get paid what they get paid to do this stuff. But anyway, give us a call. If not, I will also put up here, if you want to send an offline question, we send that here. This is again, support@swampschool.org. I do also have a question for everybody out there, and you could just send us a support ticket on this if you want to answer it. I mean, if you want to call in and give us your opinion, that's fine too. But we've been playing around with the broadcast date and time. We were doing, I think we started on a Thursday, we went to a Friday, we moved things around a little bit, and we are looking for a little bit of a kind of feedback from you all. We're thinking about doing this class. Actually, I think I've already decided to do this class next Wednesday, the broadcast. I figured a lot of people are going home for the weekend and don't really want to think about this anymore. So it's maybe Friday's not the best day, or maybe it's the best day. I don't know. But we could use some help on that. So if you say, gee, I have time during the week, we are making a YouTube recording on this as well. So you'll be able to get this from our YouTube site. And if you want to subscribe, that would definitely help us out in terms of we need some subscribers on our YouTube channel. But we have a list. We also have a whole bunch of shorts that we've put up there as well. So if you just go to Swamp School, you'll see our YouTube channel. There's actually a little button on this page that you're watching this on. This is the YouTube. And so this broadcast will be put up there probably tomorrow, and you'll be able to watch it again or listen to it or whatever. But it's been good. So with that, let me just put this up here again. This is me, and I want to thank you for your attention today. I hope it was helpful. And if you have any questions after the show, again, I'll put this back up. You can definitely reach out to us and say, I got some questions. I'd like, could you address these ahead of time? We'd love to do that. Also, this is a shameless plug for sponsorship. We've got our Kaze. I love Kaze. It's one of the best steaks I think you can get in Raleigh. Really good. But if you've got a business of any type that, Japanese steakhouse is not generally what you think of when you do wetland delineations, but, a big part of wetland delineation work is lunch. So, keep that in mind. So we've got a we will, looking for help on that. So if you've got a business you like to advertise, also if you're looking to hire, we don't, just taking, promotional stuff here. If you got something you want to, some job listings, things like that, definitely reach out to us and let us know, if you're hiring or anything along those lines, and we can put that out as well. And, basically get the, folks that are looking to get people and replace people and kind of get things going. We want to help you out with that as much as we can. So that is it. I will put one last thing up here. I think this is going to be our next show. I'm pretty sure is next Wednesday. We'll do it at 1:00. And if you are able to join us then, that would be great. And again, definitely reach out to us. Let us know. We really could use some feedback on when's the best time, based on your busy work week, what's going on and what would be the best opportunity for you to watch our show. So with that, I wish you well, and I will fade out into the distance. So have a great week, and we'll see you next week.